Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 31st of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the negotiation process that is currently taking place behind the scene between Russia, Ukraine and the Western countries. There are several things that these countries are discussing. First of all, they are discussing the ceasefire. At least the president of Serbia, Vucic, he asked and proposed Russia to make a ceasefire with Ukraine, with Ukrainians, with Zelensky, but according to information we have, Vladimir Putin has refused this proposal. So this is the first paragraph that the countries and parties are discussing. The second one is the possible missile strike that is going to take place this upcoming winter. And according to information we have, and everybody knows, that nothing can stop the Russians to begin attacking the Ukrainian energy facilities, including nuclear energy facilities, which will most likely lead to complete blackout. And furthermore, according to this blackout, Zelensky was already talking during the previous few days when he was interviewed by the Western media. He reported that most likely we are going to see where the Ukrainians are going to face the blackouts during the upcoming winter. This is the second thing. The third thing that the parties are discussing, of course, the long-range missiles that Ukrainians are asking to lift restrictions to attack deep inside of Russia, because Ukrainians believes that Tomahawks can allow Ukrainians to stop the Russians, to destroy their warehouses, and at least to slow them down. Another point of discussions is the air defense. We're talking about Polish air defense. Zelensky is asking Western countries, asking permissions of the United States of America to use Polish air defense forces to bring down Russian missiles that at least are flying into the western direction. Another paragraph that the parties are discussing, the complete withdrawing the positions on the territory of Russian Federation. As I understand, this is the main paragraph, the ultimate paragraph from the Russian Federation, and the Russians are saying, until you remove your forces from the territory of Russia, we are not going to have any negotiations with you, with Ukrainians and the Western countries. And the most important paragraph for discussion is the use of North Korean troopers on the territory of Russian Federation, at least in the Suji direction. The sources are saying that in November, at least the Ukrainian sources are saying that in November we are going to see the first batch of North Korean troopers. We are talking about 12,000 soldiers that have already arrived on the territory of the Kursk direction, the territory of Russia and around the Kursk and inside of Kursk area. The sources are saying that there are 3 generals that will control these 12,000 soldiers. There are going to be 5 brigades. The quantity of soldiers in these brigades varies from 2 till 3,000 soldiers, and there are also 500 officers, and these 5 brigades are going to gain experience on the ground on the Suji direction. So all these things are currently in the discussion process. And as I understand, this is going to be something like a domino. The thing is that who starts the first, who will break these negotiations, everything will fall immediately. And everything will be released, everything will be resolved in November. Most likely after the president elections of the President of the United States of America, because everything depends on that. If one president wins, then the Russians will start this domino. If another president wins, then the Western countries and Ukraine, in charge of the Western countries, will start their own domino, which will lead to complete collapse, possible collapse of everything, and to completely different special military operation. And so let's see what is going to be next. But obviously everybody has very strong cards in their hands, and let's see what is going to be next. Now let's talk about the situation on the ground, and first we're going to continue our discussion about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. First, we're going to talk about the line between Shakhtarskaya and Yasnaya Polyana. Very interesting situation with this village by the name of Shakhtarskaya. As we can see, the Russians still haven't managed to secure the entire village. The Russians control around 30% of the settlement, another 30% are located in the contested area, and 30% most likely under complete Ukraine control. You know that the Russians managed to enter the village of Shakhtarskaya a long time ago. The first geolocation indications that allow us to understand that we received somewhere on the 27th of October. On the 28th of October, we have colored some part of Shakhtarska, and since the 28th of October, we haven't received even a single geolocation that can confirm additional Russian progress. So we have already 3 days left, but we still see that part of Shakhtarska is under complete Ukrainian control. But we have completely different story about Zolota and Nyva. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to establish complete control over this settlement, at least that was stated by the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions and to secure the tree lines that are located around the village of Yasnaya Polyana. We're talking about these fields. So the Russians are moving further in the northern direction. There are lots of options. The Russians may try to outflank the settlement of Maximovka from the west and the northwest, or the Russians may try their luck and to move in the direction of Rozdov and Constantinople. But most likely the Ukrainians have already prepared the defense belt before this attack, so I'm not sure that the Russians have chances right now to move in the northern direction. Maybe they have, but I'm not sure they're going to risk. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Novoukrainka, Bagayavlenka line. As you can see, we have also lots of geolocations, a lot of flags in this area. We have just flags in this area, and let's talk about the first flag. Today we got report that the 4T separate brigade, Marine Brigade of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation published the video of how they were raising the flag in the most central part, in the southern part of the city, of the village of Novoukrainka. 2 Russian soldiers raised their military signs. They wore signs and made some selfies on the entrance to the town hall. Based on this video, lots of mappers have adjusted their maps. We haven't adjusted anything because this territory was already adjusted in Russian favor based on this video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video that we got yesterday, the Ukrainians were bombing the same building where the Russians raised their flag today. Maybe the Ukrainians were forced to retreat from the northern part and from the northeastern part. We don't know about this, but different mappers reported that the Ukrainians have already retreated from the northern and the northeastern part. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to maintain the line between the village of Novoukrainka and the village of Bagayavlenka and improve their position significantly. So let's compare the map between the 30th of October, this is the situation on the ground, and on the 31st of October, we see the significant progress according to different mappers, including the pro-Ukrainian ones, in the middle between these two settlements. So we see that the Russians are maintaining the line of combat contact, and currently the Russians see just one problem in front of them before further movements in the northern direction, and we're talking about this company stronghold, the biggest stronghold between two settlements. The Ukrainians digged in deeper during the previous years, and now the Russians think how to outflank this stronghold and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. If Ukrainians lose this stronghold, then the Russians will face no resistance to move further in the northern direction until this river, the river of Sukhie Yali. So this is the situation on this direction. Furthermore, we got additional updates that the Russians managed to improve their positions to the north of Bagayavlenka towards the village of Trudova. We got this report from neutral mappers, and we have changes on the ground according to these mappers. So these are the changes. Just one single tree line was captured by the Russians, and we understand that most likely along this tree line the Russians are planning to outflank Trudova from the west and maybe to block supply and support that goes from the north. There is just one bridge that most likely the Russians will try to destroy in the very near future. Now let's move further and let's talk about the territory between Yelizavetovka and Vodyane. This territory was colored in Russian favor based on the video that we got, and in this map we can see that this territory was already captured by the Russians. This territory was marked as contested area, and today on the 31st of October we got the video that allow us to color this territory in Russian favor. We have the video that was published by the Russian sources of how the Russian troopers were storming this tree line with a significant number of soldiers, and first they were PV-droning this territory, trying to clear the area, and after that the Russians attacked and we colored the territory in Russian favor. So most likely this is the area of responsibilities of the group of forces south, and this group of forces haven't published us anything for the previous 2 days. The last report we got is the control over the village village of Katerinovka, and we got this statement on the 29th of October. So yesterday they haven't shown us anything, and today we got additional progress on the ground. So as I understand, the group of forces south are facing some problems on the line between Katerinovka and Kurakhova, because for the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special or anything new, and we don't know for sure what exactly is happening on the territory of Kurakhova itself. I'll remind you that just yesterday we got the significant number of geolocations that confirm the Russian progress, and the entrance on the territory of the settlement itself. It's the heart of the South Donbas direction, but we have some progress on the ground according to unconfirmed and not reliable resources. But as for the 31st of October, we don't have anything. So it's very weird, very interesting, and we have lots of questions. Now let's move further and let's talk about the line, about the area of responsibilities of the group of forces center. There are very heavy clashes, we have changes on the ground, and some of them were confirmed by the videos. For example, let's start from Kurachovka. We have Kurachovka and we have the video that was published by the 114th Special Separate Motor Rifle Brigade of the Armored Forces of Russian Federation. And in this video we can see the last days, the last hours or minutes of assault process, at least in the eastern part of the settlement. The Russians were FPV droning and attacking Ukrainian positions in the trenches, and in the final part of the video we can see two Russian soldiers that were raising the flag above the building in the central part. This is once again very special, very interesting video, because we see that the building where the Russians raised the flag and the building around weren't damaged by the Ukrainians or by the Russians during the clashes, which means that Ukrainians abandoned their positions without showing any resistance to the Russian forces. So this is the situation on the ground. As for neutral mappers and as for pro-Ukrainian mappers, they also show additional progress, but both the neutral mappers and pro-Ukrainian mappers shows that not just either entire Kurachovka or a part of Kurachovka came under Russian control, but neither neutral nor pro-Ukrainian mappers show control over these facilities. But as for the pro-Russian resources, this territory was also captured by the Russians. So now let's compare the map between two dates. This is the situation by the end of the 30th of October. The Russians just entered these facilities. The Russians just managed to secure the northern part of Kurakhova. The Ukrainians were still in this artillery pocket, and by the 31st of October the Russians captured everything here, forced the Ukrainians to fall back, and the Russians, very interesting, managed to improve their positions between Novoselidovka itself and Kurakhova. We're talking about this dense network of the fortifications. At least that was stated by neutral mappers. So this is the situation in this area, and now we are coming to the Novodmitrievka. We have additional video that confirms Russian control over the main supply roads. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians moved their FPV drone further in the southwestern direction and established certain control over the main roads, and during the previous 24 hours the significant number of vehicles were destroyed along the line between Kurakhova itself and Novodmitrievka. The sources reported that Ukrainians conducted several counterattacks, and maybe due to this FPV drone control the Ukrainian counterattacks failed. Now let's talk about the city of Selidovo, because after a very short operational pause the Russians resumed their attempts to attack further in the northwestern direction. During the previous 24 hours we got the significant number of videos of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian positions along the road, along the railway between the city of Selidovo itself and the city of Pokrovsk. As you can see, we have several FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles along this line. 1, 2, 3, 4 geolocated videos, and I'll remind you our golden rule: if we see FPV drones, then most likely the Russians are moving in the same direction. Based on this, let's say, axioma, based on this theory, based on these geolocations, we can make a conclusion that the Russians, after a very short operational pause, are going to continue moving along the railways, and as you can see, these railways are moving further in the direction of Shevchenka, Novy Trud, and then further in the northern directions towards the city of Pokrovsk itself. The Russians are planning to move along the railways, and now it's obviously. Also, we have changes on the ground. This is the situation by the end of the 30th of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 31st of October, and this information was confirmed both pro-Russian mappers and by pro-Ukrainian mappers. Now let's move further and let's talk about Novogrodovka, and there are very heavy clashes. As you can see, the Russians are trying to move along the railways as well in the direction of Pokrovsk itself, and the Russians are trying to use the railways to move further in the direction of Mirnograd, but the Ukrainians also understand this, and so that's why the Ukrainians are not counting their forces, their units, and they're counterattacking the Russians. There are very heavy clashes for the mine of Novogrodovka III, and the clashes for this strategical point has been taken already up to 3 or 4 weeks or even more, and neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians have the full initiative. The situation is 50-50. There are very heavy clashes, but as for the Russians, they need this landfill and this strategical point to move further in the northern directions. The Ukrainians need this stronghold, this strategical point, to stop the Russians and not to allow them to move in the northern direction. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for the city of Terezk, the Russians stopped their offensive operation completely. We haven't received anything for the previous several days, just regular FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles and personnel on the territory of the mine, the central mine, and the industrial residential areas, but without any changes on the ground, neither from the Russian side nor from the Ukrainian side. As for the city of Chasiv Yar, the Russians continue improving their positions along the area of the breakthrough. I reminded that just around a month ago, the Russians managed to cross the Siversk Donbas canal along N32 road, and now the Russians are trying to expand their positions in the northern, the western, the southern direction with the purpose to create a stable foothold and to concentrate the significant number of forces that can be used for further advance in the western and the northwestern direction. So we're talking about the city of Konstantinovka itself and the ruins that left of Chasiv Yar. Now let's talk about the Siversk direction, and as for this territory, the main and the most important updates are coming from the small village by the name of Donetsk. This village is located to the northeast of the settlement by the name of Slaviansk, and in this video that was published today by pro-Russian resources, we can see 4 Iskander strikes in a row in one position. This is a unique case. A reminder that probably since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians attacked probably 2 or 3 times using the same tactics. I'm talking about 4 or 5 Iskander missiles in one point, and later we got additional details about the Russian target, what the Russians were targeting. And according to information we have, the temporary deployment point of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was attacked. And the Russians are saying that as a result of these 4 Iskander strikes, the Ukrainians lost up to 4 armored vehicles, 1 warehouse, and around 80 soldiers. So these are the losses of the most likely 10th Mountain Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The village of Ternit, there are very heavy clashes for the northern outskirts. The Ukrainians understand the value of the settlement, so that's why they try to slow down the Russians by attacking the offensive forces from another bank of the river of Zherebets. And today the Russians, as you can see, were bombing the Ukrainian positions on the another bank of Zherebets river with the use of FAB 1500, 500 and 3000, trying to pin the Ukrainians down and to force them to fall back from this area, which will release the Russian forces to move further in the southern direction. Northern Kupiansk direction, just yesterday the Russians reported about complete control over the village by the name of Kruglyakhovka, and today the Russians published the video with the Russian flag that was raised on the biggest construction for probably for some mobile communications or so on. The Russian flag was raised, and based on this video we have the Ministry of Defense report, and we have some video proof with the Russian flag. Based on these 2 events, we now understand that we have no doubts about Russian control over this territory. Also, the Russians resumed their offensive operation on the line between Mesazharovka and Stelmakhovka in the direction of the settlement by the name of Lazova. At least this was stated by different mappers, and as a result of clashes during the previous day, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. So this information once again was published by neutral mappers, and these are the changes on the ground. So as you can see, just yesterday the Russians were let's say in 1 kilometer from the village of Lazova, and as for today's, the Russians just in several hundred meters before the settlement itself. If the Russians are able to take the settlement under control, then most likely the Ukrainians that are currently located in the line between Berestova and Zagryzovo would face the significant problems, and they would be forced to fall back, trying to escape possible encirclement. The city of Kupiansk and the north and most northern Kupiansk direction, we can see just the regular Russian activity. We can see the significant number of FAB attacks, a significant number of missile strikes. The Russians are bombing both the Kupiansk city itself and the village of Petropavlovka, where during the previous several days the additional Russian progress in advance was spotted. Now let's talk about the Sudzha direction. During the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just regular videos with the Russian regular activity. And for example, on this video we can see several Iskander strikes on Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of the village by the name of Pisarovka. Most likely the Russians first managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces, and then the Russians attacked this territory with at least 3 Iskander missiles. Very heavy explosions, and most likely the Russians managed to deal the significant damage to the armored forces of Ukraine. And after several strikes, we see in the left corner the significant number of Ukrainians that began running from this forest, trying to save their lives. So this is the situation in this area, and I'll remind you once again that according to information we have, during the next few days up to 12,000 North Korean soldiers can be introduced by the Russians exactly on this direction, and obviously this is going to be a turning point in the special military operation, because the Ukrainians and the Western countries will be forced to act, will be forced probably to lift any restrictions for Ukraine to attack deep inside of Russia. Probably there are going to be no restrictions to use a Polish air defense this system to bring down Russian missiles in the West, and many other different things. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.